On Simcha, and this week's share is going to be on something that's very close to that, and in many ways it overlaps, and that is Hashgacha Protis. However, I believe this one is going to be over the course of 3 shiurim, perhaps maybe 2, but I'm thinking it's going to most likely be 3, and there's several things in Chassidus that are connected very strongly together, and they have a lot that they share in common. They come from the same general idea, which is the creation of Yesh Me'ayin. And that's the basis. But they have different ways of expressions. And in this case, the expression of Hashgacha Protis, as we'll soon explain, is something that is not just like Simcha, which is a certain behavior, a certain emotional reaction. It's something that requires, on the part of the Yid, to draw a lesson, which is more intellectual in that way. So there's different expressions and there's different results, but the idea of Hashgacha Protis, as we'll soon see, comes again that Chassidus is based and founded on L'Olam Hashem Dvar Chanitzah B'Shamayim, that the Eibishter's words are suspended, are constantly there, recreating the world. Once you have that foundation, you have Emunah, the way a Yid has Emunah. You have B'tachon, which again, there's a distinct difference between Emunah and B'tachon, but they're also very much related. And you have Simcha, and you have the belief in Hashgacha Protis. So I just want to begin, first of all, by explaining where we get this material from. We were blessed and we were privileged and fortunate to have a letter from the Rebbe that's also printed in Likutei Sichos, the back of Likutei Sichos, a letter from the Rebbe. It's letter 94, Tzadik Dalet, in Chelik Aleph, where the Rebbe gives a clear layout, an essay on the whole inyan of Hashgacha Protis. I have a copy of the letter. It's extensive and it's complicated. It's not complicated, but it's complex. There are many different details, many different shittas, and the Rebbe goes through everything on how the sheet of the Baal Shem Tov evolved. We're not going to go into the letter this week. Rather, we'll discuss more encompassing way of the different details and the structure of what the Rebbe is saying. But we're not going to get into the study of it, the technical study of it, perhaps next week. But for now, let's just talk in general about the idea of Hashgacha Protis. What is it based on, and how does it work, and what does it dictate, and so on. So let's leave this aside. But without an introduction of a story, then there's no hook. We got to do a hook here. So let's talk about at least one hook now. There's a famous story that's been circulating. It happened in the 60s, but not too long ago. It couldn't have been too long ago. On one of the interviews, my encounter on Gem, there was an interview with Rebbetzin Swerdlov, and she was part of the Neshei Chabad then, or part of a group in Neshei Chabad that traveled, I believe it was to Detroit. They had regional Neshei Chabad conventions for Neshei Chabad. Today we have it for Shluchim, and Shlucha is a lot that's common. We have a Neshei Chabad convention here in Crown Heights, a central one, not exclusively for Shluchim or Shluchais, but we also have, it was much more widespread that a group of women, Chabad women, would go to a city, and that city would be hosting this Chabad convention. I believe it still goes on, but it's lost in so many other things that are going on. But in the 60s, it stood out. It was something that was a highlight. They went for Shabbos. and they left their husbands to babysit. You know what that means. They got to get back as soon as possible, because how long could you rely on miracles? But they're going with the Rebbe's koiches because they're going to a function, a very important function. It so happens to be that they got to the airport on after Shabbos Sunday, and they come to the airport and they find out that the flight is canceled. They got to get home. I'm sure there were other reasons why they have to get home, but she made this the main reason, because the husbands were watching the children and taking care of the house. And when are we going to have? When is the next flight? When are we going to leave? We don't know. I think it was bad weather. Whatever the reason, they felt whatever urgency besides the reason that's given, which is a good enough urgency, I think, we can relate. The Tati says he fed breakfast to the children, very, very healthy breakfast. That had eggs, and it had oil and sugar. Basically, he gave them some leftover cake from the Shabbos before. But it's very healthy. Such corners being cut can only last a certain amount of time, and everything else that you could imagine. So one of the women called the Rebbe's office, Maskirus, the Rebbe's secretariat office, and said, we need a bracha. We're stuck in the airport. And I believe it was Rabbi Klein who was on the line, and he says, hold on. They explained what's going on. There's no flight. They're stuck in the airport. What should they do? So Rabbi Klein comes back, and he says that Rebbe wants to know, what's means stuck? What does stuck mean? So in her innocence, this lady, I think she's not with us anymore, Aleha Shalom, answers, stuck means, he says, Rebbe knows what the definition, what the interpretation, what the meaning of the word stuck is. Rebbe wants to know, how do you come to this kind of a conclusion? How is it possible? How does that mean? In other words, a Yid knows that that the steps of man is already predestined and predesigned, pre-planned by Hashem. How are you stuck as if you ended up here without the Eibishter arranging it for it to happen? They got the message, and even though it was before Mitzrayim, but I guess there was still a campaign about Neder Shabbos Kodesh, Neshek, lighting candles, Shabbos candles, and they went around the whole airport, the whole area that they were in, the terminal that they were in, and they did Mivtza Neshek. And she concludes, and she says that who knows how many people and families and children and their children ended up being connected to Yiddishkeit and practicing the mitzvah of later lighting Shabbos candles and so on. And that's the result of being stuck. So it's important to know that when we talk about Hashgacha Protis, it's one of those things that's all the time. It's there always, in everything, in anyone. It's in everything, as we're soon going to see, the Baal Shem Tov's Shita, the Baal Shem Tov's teaching. But for the human, especially for the Yid, it's something that we have to take to heart, and it's always going on when you're alone, when you're in the street, when you're home, when you're with friends, when you're at work. Anywhere, anytime, anything, even when you sleep. Whatever happens that you wake up, remember a dream or something, that's a very big Hashgacha Protis, because we know that there's things that you dream that tell you a little bit about yourself, what you have to work on, where your mind is. Someone dreams about the Rebbe. It's something to analyze, it's something to take to heart. Someone dreams about something else, he helped a Jew. Or anything else that's a reminder, maybe. There's certain signals, there's certain cues that are being communicated. There's certain things coming from the subconscious. So even when you sleep, maybe more than in other cases. So we have to know that was meant stuck. if a person ended up somewhere, or if a person is in a certain situation, or if a person is going through or anything else, encounters somebody else, we have to remember that there's no stuck. There's no such thing that this happened to me, and it doesn't seem like it was meant to happen. It's impossible. We'll talk more about this idea, but before I start with the actual class, I'm going to introduce one more story that, in this case, it brings out the message a little bit stronger and a little bit deeper. Dr. Lord, but to me he's Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Olav Shalom, during COVID. He didn't pass away from COVID, but he passed away in that period, later period. Some say we're still in it, so I don't know what later means, but a year or two into it. And I heard a recording from him randomly that went around. It was on a WhatsApp. And he was describing what is the lesson, what do we learn from COVID? There's got to be a positive lesson here. But he gives a beautiful introduction, and he gave this talk on the week of Vayikra, of Parshas Vayikra. And he said, and he brought out something very strong, extremely insightful, profound. And he says like this, Vayikra, this is of course brought from different places that discuss this. The Rebbe happens to mention this idea, I don't know how extensively, but he developed it. And he brought it out in the way he brought it out, and he applied it to COVID. I'm not here to talk about the Hashgacha Protis of COVID. Many have already done that and attempted that, and I'm not one to teach Hashgacha Protis like what we see from what and how everybody should interpret whatever Hashgacha Protis you're going through or general public is going through, other than what the Rebbe tells us and teaches us how to look at things. So we could all apply those principles, and we know that right now everything directs to one general thing, which is Mashiach. So if you have anything that you can understand from any event, from any occurrence, from any experience, then obviously you come up with something that you feel would be a plausible discovery, a plausible idea. But he says like this, Vayikra. What is Vayikra? Vayikra is a word in the Torah, the first pasuk in the Pasha, and the Chumash of Vayikra, and the Aleph is a small Aleph. We know there's a lot of explanation, a lot of talk, and a lot of different insights about this. We know the story with the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe, and he took him into Cheder, as the custom is, Areinfiren, and he taken a talus, and the custom is to learn from Vayikra, the reasons for it, let the pure come and learn about the pure, and a little child who just had an upshanish, usually it's around that time, is pure, is holy, he's no sins, and he's fresh, so he learns about the Kabbanis. He asked the Alter Rebbe about the Aleph, and the Alter Rebbe gave him a beautiful explanation, which the Rebbe has sichos on, and so on. What is Vayikra without the Aleph? Rabbi Sachs says, Vayikra without the Aleph is Vayikar. What is Vayikar? We know we had it in Parshas Bilam. Vayikar means chanced. Chanced. He chanced upon something. He chanced on somebody as he was walking on the street. It means the opposite of planned. It means the opposite of coordinated. Whatever. I'm looking for the word. Orchestrated. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, I don't want to say instant. The opposite of orchestrated. Vayikar, without an aleph, is the opposite of kedusha. It's the opposite of a likus. It's non-belief in a creator. There's nothing that's happenstance. There's nothing that happens to be. It happens to be a coincidence. It happened to just come to be and come about randomly. We use the word random. Random is the opposite of Eibishter that created everything and recreates it every moment. There's no random. So Vayikar, without the Aleph, is the worst thing possible. Vayikar also means cold, kar. Kuf resh is the shayrish. Kar means cold, means there's nothing here that means anything to me. It's not anything that has a connection to me. Vayikar means I never planned it, I never expected it, I never thought of it, and I don't care about it. So he says, so much so, to connect the beginning of the Chumash with the end of the Chumash of Vayikra. The only place where it says keri, which is again the same thing as Vayikar. Yikar, keri, which also means cold, which means indifference. That's the word I'm looking for. Indifference. And I'm not interested. Sometimes you meet someone in the street, you ask him if he's Jewish. Indifferent. And 7 times in Parshas B'chukoisai, the last Parsha of Chumash Vayikra, the first Parsha is Vayikra with a small aleph, and the last Parsha mentions keri 7 times, and the word keri is not mentioned anywhere else in the Torah. What does that tell you? It tells you there's a message here. The message is that a Yid has to know what does Vayikra mean versus Vayikar, versus keri. Vayikra with the aleph, says Rashi, it's a lashon chiba. It's an affectionate term. Ava. The Eibishter calls, when you call someone to you, what happened? It's something that the person is interested in. It's something the person wants. It's something the person is focusing himself and putting himself into that very action. It's not like, hey, hi. Vayikra means calling, as we say, Kahanov Hashem l'chol koirav l'chol sheyikra'u be'emes. The Eibush is close to those that call Hashem. Call means seeking. The Eibush sought Moshe. So it's the opposite of cold, it's warm. So this is how he explains it. He says, we have to remember, Vayikra, without the aleph, is indifference, is coldness, is the opposite of something that means anything to me, and it's unimportant. Which means that we could look at the world and we could say, this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. But with you, little aleph, it's a tiny aleph, he explains. You put in your own little input. What is our job? What does the Eibishter want when it comes to Hashgacha Protis? And he's focusing on Hashgacha Protis. This is what the whole teaching is about of Vayikra. Put in the aleph, a little aleph. Put in your own connection. Look at it and get it. Conclude. See how it all comes together. See how it all spells something that's a message, something that's a reality that you are able to see by connecting the dots. And then it changes from one extreme to the other. So this was his basic idea of saying that there's nothing, especially something like COVID, and he explained what he explained, and we know already so many of these different ideas that were mentioned about realizing and recognizing the value of the family and the value of so many things that happened then, and preparation for Mashiach, perhaps. I'm not sure if he said that, but he indicated a lot of the same idea. And what we're learning about now is going to be about our main task as Yidden, which is to constantly look beneath the surface, to constantly make the connection, and see a reality that would not be seen and not be understood and not be recognized if not for our little input by deciding to connect the dots. So let's talk about Hashgacha Protis, and we'll start with what is Hashgacha Protis. We know that one of the 13 principles of faith is Hashem is in control of everything that happens. The Rambam is the one who authored the 13 principles of faith, and many Yidden say it. We don't say it, but we definitely think it, especially the 12th one. And we definitely think about the coming of Mashiach and Tchias HaMesim and Emunah in one Eibishter and so on. And one of the principles of faith is to know that Hashem is running the whole world, every little detail in the world. So that's the foundation and the basis for the idea of Hashgacha Protis. It doesn't mean that that's the source, but it means that we know that if it's a principle, it's a pillar of Yiddishkeit. And if it's a pillar of Yiddishkeit, together with all those big pillars, like I mentioned, Mashiach and Tchias HaMesim, it's something that we have to be careful to take seriously and to know it well and to get used to applying it as much as possible. Now, when it comes to Hashgacha Protis, it's, like I said before, the Rebbe's letter is complex. There's a lot going on over here. It's not just like easy, one way of seeing it. Amongst the Razal, amongst the sages, amongst the rabbis, there are different opinions. And some opinions say that it's only for humans. That means when we say it's in every minute detail. What do we mean by Hashgacha Protis? Every minute detail of anything is all intentional. So the word I was looking for before. Intentional. It's all by design. It's all planned, and it's all arranged. And it's all there because this is dafka what is intended. It's not just happening together with something else, as we'll soon explain. So when we say in every minute detail, some people say that it's only in man, only in the human species. It's not in the plant kingdom. It's not in the animal kingdom. It's not in the inanimate kingdom. And these are rabbis. These are holy people, and they claim that when you talk about in every minute detail of whatever it is, you're talking about in humans. Then there's another opinion that says only in Jews. So even within man, there's some say that only in Jews. Again, we're talking about every little tiny detail, every nuance, every little trivial little thing that doesn't really have any significance as we would see it, but it's dafka there, the way and how much of it and how it functions and all that. Then others say that it's not only in Jews, but in a higher caliber Jew, which means not just in any Jew. Where is this Hashgacha Protis in the finest and the smallest details? Not just in man, not just in Jews, within Jews itself, in the higher caliber Jew. And then some say it includes those things that belong to a Jew also have this Hashgacha Protis in every detail of it because it belongs to the Jew. So it has it's serving a more important role because a Jew is the purpose for creation. And then there's others that say not necessarily in something only that belongs to a Jew, but we know that the soul of a Jew can go into different things. We know from stories about the soul of certain animals, and we know stories even in certain plants and things like that, that the soul goes into it. Story of the Baal Shem Tov, where he told someone, "Did you make a bracha?" when he met with a non-Jew for a business deal. And well, he came to the Baal Shem Tov, and basically the Baal Shem Tov ended up revealing to him, the Baal Shem Tov with his Ruach HaKodesh saw that they closed the deal with the tradition of saying l'chaim. I don't think it was the word l'chaim, but with taking a shot. That was one of the ways that you seal the deal, you know? And he asked him, "Did you make a bracha?" He says, no. He says, "Let me tell you the story about what was in that cup." And he told him the whole story of how the little bit of grain that hung on for dear life to end up in every stage of its processing, to end up in the cup of a Jew, so the Jew can make a bracha because the father's neshama was in there. And he missed it. So I don't know how this works. I'm not responsible for anything when it comes to souls being incarnated into some kind of other things. But I can tell you that if it's something that a Jewish soul is in, obviously there's going to be Hashgacha Protis involved, more than just something that doesn't have that property. And so again, that specific, detailed, perfect exactness of every tiny little detail about it is going to apply. And then we have those things that are not like that. So you're going to say, what do you mean those things are not like that? Give an example. Seems like everything would be that way, no? Automatically. Well, if you think so, then Baruch Hashem, your natural way of thinking is a very high, pure faith in the Eibishter. I wish everybody thought that way. But there are those that say that if it's not Hashgacha Protis in every tiny detail, it's some things that happen as a result of a greater thing. So for instance, if Hashem planned and decided that a tree should be uprooted in somebody's backyard, so that everything about the tree being uprooted and that action and that result is going to be planned. But what about what's going to happen as a result of that? Like, let's say when the tree falls, there's going to be a paper being blown a little bit, a few feet away from where it was. Or any other result of that, that's not already necessarily part of the plan itself. That's a result. The main plan was for this to happen. And as a result of that, this is also something that occurred, but not really a necessary occurrence. So you see that we have already something that's so many ways of looking at it. Okay, so now let's talk about what does it mean that it's not happening because of Hashgacha Protis, and what's making it happen? So we have something that's a dangerous word. What's this dangerous word? The dangerous word is called nature. So when you don't attribute it to the Eibishter's causing it, the Eibishter's involvement, there's another option. Anything else that's not happening because the Eibishter is involving himself in it is called nature, which is a huge klippa, which is literally avodah zarah. But we all fall into that trap on some level or another. That's why we must be careful to apply this whole basis of Hashgacha Protis, not just like when we see something, Hashgacha Protis. We have to really work on this. So what is nature? Nature is, how did that happen? Well, the nature is that if this and this happens, and this happens because Hashem made it happen. But as the nature, something else is going to happen with it. So there are certain things left to nature. So nobody disagrees that generally everything that's happening is from the Eibishter. But the question is, other things that are like part of it, just because it's a byproduct. It's not the thing itself. It could be this way, it cannot be this way. The tree could fall and the paper won't blow. No difference at all in the action of desire, in the desired act, the desired action, the desired result. It's all the same. So then we say, so why did the paper blow? Because nature, when a tree falls, it creates a wind. And the nature of something that causes a wind is that it causes something else that's light enough to blow away. Finished. Why did the candle go out? Because Hashem wanted to make a big wind, because he wanted the Yam Suf to split, and he wanted two walls of water to stand. So he made this great, tremendous miracle and put himself into it. It's one of the highlights and one of the greatest miracles that symbolize the Eibishter's performance of miracles in the Torah. And as a result of that, the guy sitting in his tent 2 miles away, or maybe even 100 miles away, his candle blew out. Was that also part of the whole intention? The whole plan? Now, according to Chassidus, yes, absolutely. But if it's not that, then that's a result of nature. Okay, so let's understand what we're dealing with. We're dealing here with if it's only Hashem, or if it has a natural element connected to it. All right, so let's talk about what is the basis for this whole Hashgacha Protis that Taka leads us. What is the foundation? What are we basing this on? It's nice to have this great faith in the Eibishter, but Chassidus is not into nice. Chassidus wants us to understand systematically, carefully, technically, yes, logic and intelligence and wisdom and all that about the Eibishter, which seems intangible, is what the Alter Rebbe managed to bring together, the two opposites, that we should understand in our seichel, how there could be this faith in the Eibishter that's about something that is completely not possible to understand. And that is because, so this will teach us again, I told you in the beginning of the shir that there's something called Yesh Me'ayin. And Yesh Me'ayin means that if something exists, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a piece of dust. It could be a mosquito. It could be anything tiny that we don't even look at. Mosquitoes we look at, we chase them. But a piece of dust that you don't even see in the room, a particle that's not even visible to the eye. And yet, if it exists, it's only because Hashem put in an active effort and a desire to make that thing to be here. And if not for Hashem making that thing be here and creating it, creation means involvement. If this wouldn't be here, if Hashem wouldn't involve himself, this wouldn't be here. Simple as that. And once we know the concept of Yesh Me'ayin means that it has to be constantly, that's the shita of the Baal Shem Tov, brought in Sharichot Ve'amunah, that the Eibishter is constantly recreating the world from nothing, literally nothing at all, to an existence, to something, to a creation, to a being, to something that's there versus nothing. Once we know that, every single thing that exists, the tiniest thing, is being recreated every moment. Would it make sense that this could be just a random result of something called nature? How could it be? It cannot be. Once you use the idea of Yesh Me'ayin, and that automatically leads you to the Eibishter recreating a Mechadish B'Tuva B'Chol Yom Tov Ma'aseh D'Reishis, you cannot dismiss anything at all, the tiniest thing. You can't dismiss it as something that is not intentionally being created with the Eibishter's interest, involvement, desire, and plan. And it's reoccurring. And that's why we can't apply this to anything we know. So when someone has a machine, and he builds a machine, and the machine has a lot of things that he didn't put in. He built a machine. He was careful about designing it, and everything has a purpose, and everything has a certain function, and a certain dimension, and it fulfills a certain purpose. Why is the spring here? What do you mean, why is the spring here? What do you think, I'll put a spring for nothing? Because if you opened it this way, and you want it to close by itself, because you want to be able to go to the other side, and yet who knows what, then you have a spring, or you have a switch, or you have this. Okay, but you know how many things are there that the person didn't intend to have there? What's all this doing here? Like the material, what it's made up of. He used plastic, he used wood, he used metal. Everything that makes up this wood and everything that makes up this metal, and everything else that comes that he never even intended to put in there, is there without him aware of it. He didn't go to some kind of science classes to know what this consists of. So there's so much there that he never even thought about. He never even went looking for it. Hello, he goes to Home Depot and he asks for some molecules and some atoms and some who knows what. I don't even know what this is because I'm from those that didn't learn science. And could you give me some of these, the energy, and give me some mass? Give me mass, okay? How much energy and how much mass is in this piece of plywood? He doesn't know about the mass and the energy. He's not even intending to have it part of the machine. He knows one thing, yeah? He knows one thing, that he's building a machine and he's using something, but he doesn't have any clue about so much of what's there because it's out of his range. The difference between this case and the case of a person and the case of the Eibush that's creating, then every single thing that's in this world, every single thing, if you could imagine somebody that would have to create and have to build and make everything that he's building with, and there should be something there that he didn't intend to have, he wouldn't have decided to put it in. He wouldn't have involved himself and put himself through the effort to use it. Eibishter made a world, and the Eibishter intentionally is creating every single thing that's in the world. There's got to be an intention there for it, because it's happening by an action. It's happening by a certain purpose, by a certain intention. And if there's an intention there, and this intention is being reenacted every moment, that means every moment the Eibishter has his mind on every little tiny, minute, minuscule existence. How could you say there's no Hashgacha Protis? Could you imagine? It's impossible. So automatically Hashem's whole existence is not a true existence. Because the whole idea of an Hashem is that there was nothing. The Eibishter created himself, nothing created the Eibishter, and nothing could be without Hashem. And nothing could continue to exist without Hashem recreating it. Once you have those principles, you can't go any further from this truth. You can't depart from this truth. This truth is that the Eibishter has the same desire in this little thing that the Eibishter does in the biggest thing. Okay, so let's continue on to, like I said before, in Shara Yichud Amunah, the Alter Rebbe discusses this whole idea in great length. It's a deep topic. It's a deep subject. We'll touch on it more in the coming classes. But the Alter Rebbe talks about this whole idea. The Alter Rebbe even explains that the creation of Yesh Me'ayin is even a greater wonder, a greater accomplishment than the miracle of Mitzrayim, of Kriyas Yamsuf. Why? We know that Kriyas Yamsuf is a mind-boggling, whoa, nothing greater than that. We use that as an example for certain things to describe how hard it is. Kosher Kriyas Yamsuf, it's difficult at Kriyas Yamsuf. There's a lot of excitement there. There's a lot of thunder and lightning and bells and whistles and all kinds of fireworks. It's an exciting thing. There's water and it's standing. So what is the Eibishter doing? The Eibishter is changing the nature of something. The Eibishter is taking something that already exists, but it has a nature to be a certain way. And the Eibishter is taking that nature. The water normally does not stand, does not stay by itself, but it spreads and it doesn't have this structure kind of material. And what does it do? It mixes. It's something that doesn't have this solid kind of substance. And yet the Eibishter made it stand. How did the Eibishter make it stand? He made a miracle. He made a wind blow it and make it stand. But yesh me'ayin means not just that there's a creation that was created with a certain nature. And now the Eibishter is changing that nature. Who made the nature to begin with? The Eibishter did. So the wonder is not that great. But when it comes to yesh me'ayin, there was nothing. Where do you start with? There's nothing there. Guy comes in with a business. Says, I want to invest. I want to be a partner. The guy, okay. Put in a certain amount. You'll get a certain percentage of the partnership. He says, what's the least I can give? I don't know. What do you have? $10,000? No, I don't know. What's the least? Why don't they go down to 1 penny? Hey, if you give 1 penny, you might earn $10 a year. It's a nice return on 1 penny. He goes, I have one problem. I don't even have a penny. Could I be a partner for a smaller amount than that? The answer is there's nothing there to work with. If there's nothing to work with, it's like saying how many times zero is zero? Zero. You have nothing to work with. There's nothing there. And that's the idea. So when we talk about the Eibishter, so you say, well, what about a person that changes the nature of something? Like silver, let's say. And he melts the silver. And now he took a silver sheet or a silver block. I don't know how it comes. Because when we do invest in silver, me and my children and everything, Baruch Hashem, I don't know what silver is even. We never see it. Especially if we don't invest in it, we don't even know really how much it is and all that. But it comes in a solid form, right? And then you melt it and you put it into a shape that's not its natural way of being extracted from the ground. So the guy changed the nature. Aha! So he's a little bit like the Eibishter. Chas v'shalom. Even that a human being can't do. Forget about creating something from nothing. But even changing the nature of something, he's not really changing the nature of something. You know why? Because ingrained in this particular existence of, let's say, a silver chunk of silver, is the potential in it. There's already the nature of the potential to be used in such a way. So he's basically given the power by the Eibishter to bring out the potential of something that has that potential. So he's not really changing the nature. Water doesn't have the potential to stand on its own. Okay, the Eibishter made a wind, so that might explain how it's not even the miracle that it's showing that even more that the Eibishter made a miracle for a miracle and all that. But yesh me'ayin is not just changing the nature, which humans can't do. It can only reveal the nature. Yesh me'ayin is impossible. And that's why it has to happen all the time. So once we know that it has to happen all the time, and we know that it has to happen with everything for the same reason, because it's created from nothing. So the question is, discovery time. What's the difference between nature and miracles? If there's no nature, and it's everything from Hashem making it happen every moment, so you're basically describing a miracle. Yeah. If we all came to that conclusion, we're all geniuses, and that's what Chassidus says. So what is the difference between a miracle and nature? Why don't we call it miracle? Guess what? It's called miracle. Chassidus explains that nature is called nes tmidi, a constant miracle. Something that you get used to, something that you become reliant and dependent on, and you take for granted. and it happens over and over, you're not going to go crazy about it. You're going to call it nature because it's a regular occurrence. Does it mean that it's not a miracle? It's no less of a miracle than a miracle. It's just that it doesn't excite and it doesn't catch our attention and it doesn't look so fascinating, so sensational. But the truth is that there's absolutely no difference between a miracle and nature. The only difference is, just like we see the sun come up every day, no one runs out and brings his whole family and calls his friends and takes pictures and sends it to WhatsApps and all these things. Whoa! This big, bright, hot, yellow chunk, size of a beach ball, of course. It's many times bigger than the world. From that distance, what do you want from the guy? It's coming, it's rising. But let's say it's the first time you saw it. I don't think you'd be very indifferent to the whole thing. I think that would probably take up most of your day. Call in sick, take off the rest of the day from work. We're going to experience this here. We're going to watch it. We're going to come from this angle, from that angle. We're going to see what we can do with it. And because it's happening every single day for all these thousands of years, so it becomes the norm. And that's really what a miracle is. And another miracle is that you can't attribute it to a certain routine, to a certain cycle of functioning. So you can't give it a name of this is how it works, which means that the Eibishter is putting in, and you see the Eibishter's intervention into every part of it. Because there's nothing the Eibishter is using that's seen or that's done regularly together with something else. So the whole miracle is a display of the Eibishter's intervention. Let's continue. So what are we going to say now? Comes the question, we're going to say that the sun doesn't have properties, doesn't have benefits, doesn't have power. Well, power is a dangerous word, but doesn't give so many important, so many essentials that we need. So what's wrong with the Goyim who worship the sun? What, the Yidden are running around and say, sun? Hey, it doesn't make anything grow. Taita says it does. Taita says that the sun, I mean, it's an open fact. I'm not saying you need proof from Taita. It is that way because the Taita says it that way, and that's what makes it be that way. But we don't have to go and discover that the sun makes things grow. And the sun gives warmth. We don't have to go and discover it, or we can't deny that. We don't have to go and say, it's not true. Eibishter is the only thing. The sun doesn't have warmth. The sun doesn't give anything. Sun doesn't give anything. Sun doesn't have anything. Or light. So what are they doing so wrong when they're worshiping the sun and the moon and the constellations? The answer is, they're making one little mistake. Imagine someone goes over to a pen. I wish I had a pen, but make believe this is a pen, and says, that's a wonderful poem you put together. Did anybody deny the fact that you need a pen to write a poem? And it's a beautiful poem. And guess what? The guy says, I couldn't have done it without the pen. And he's right. He couldn't have done it without the pen. But no one is giving the pen credit for it. Why? Because the pen can have all the necessary components that is needed for this particular thing to happen. Anything or a tool that a person builds a beautiful structure with, it can have all those things. And no one's denying it. And no one's going to say, hey, I believe in the Eibishter. I'm going to write with my hat. No, he's going to look for a pen. And if he needs something to be warm, he's going to look for fire if he wants to warm up some food. And no one's going to say, we are nothing. We're not Mormons. Baruch Hashem. I don't mean Mormons. I mean those other guys. Amish. We don't have a problem recognizing and utilizing everything in Hashem's world to be hidden and to live life in this world, which is what the Eibishter wants from us. That's why he put in this world. The only difference is who's calling the shots, who's deciding things. That's the whole difference between a tool and the user of the tool. I can't open up a bolt with my fingers. Now, I'm the one who could choose any tool to open up anything, to do anything with. I could build buildings. I could create and do impossible things. This bolt can't do anything. This bolt is stronger than me. And what do I need to use? A wrench? What is a wrench compared to me? Yeah, the wrench has a certain way of being used that you can't open up a bolt without it. No one's going to go and say, wrench, you're greater than me. Why is the wrench not great? Because the wrench is inanimate. The wrench doesn't have a way of choosing, deciding, and acting upon its own desire, because it doesn't have a desire. It doesn't have anything. It's dead. It's technically dead, even though it has the godly spark in it, because to exist in itself, to be intact, to be in existence, it has to have some kind of godly spark. But it's a whole different story, as the Alter Rebbe explains. The nefesh of a daimim is way different than nefesh semeach and achai, and those are way different than nefesh of a person, and so on. So that's the whole idea. The whole idea is that to worship the sun and the moon, it means, in other words, a denial of the oneness of Hashem. It means, in other words, a denial of the recreation of everything. Because even if you're going to say that, yes, that happened, but now it does have its own identity, and it does have its own qualities, you can't say that, because it's happening every moment. And whatever it is because it's being made to be that way now, which means it can't be anything without the Creator. Nothing. And that's why someone says, if you, one time, a non-chassid, otherwise known as a misnagid, who had a limited view of Hashem because lack of learning chassidus. We all have. Misnagid is not a certain person living in a certain block in a certain house and a certain room in the house. That's where his bedroom is, and so on. Misnagid is when we choose to follow a certain logic that doesn't involve the logic of the Nefesh Likis, which is based on Torah. So he says to the Chassid, so the Chassid wanted to show him how simple or how primitive his thinking is when it comes to Hashem. And he said to him, how would the Eibishter destroy the world? How, if the Eibishter wants to destroy the world, how would the Eibishter destroy the world? Now that's a huge problem. It's like getting rid of evidence, you know? I don't know. You ever try getting rid of chametz? It's always creeping up somewhere. Mustn't you try? It just time comes and it's over. You say, I don't know, Eibishter, bottle, hefke. How do you get rid of the evidence? So the Eibishter is, how does the Eibishter get rid of the world? So Nagid thinks it's a little bit of a problem. And he says, I know, the Eibishter burns the whole world down. And then he takes the ash and he spreads it over the 7 oceans. I was just interested to know, why did he leave the water? No choice. How are we going to destroy everything else? The whole thing's a joke. First of all, the Eibishter doesn't have to go through that. Second of all, we have the ashes that are still existing just because it's in the water, and we have the water that's existing. The whole thing is silly, it's childish. So the Chassid says, you temple. The Eibishter just stops thinking about it. The Eibishter just stops involving himself in making it be. It's as simple as that. The table you're dreaming about, that you put the beautiful meal on that table and beautiful food and beautiful dishes and decorate it with the most expensive things, and you have so many guests that are coming and sitting around the table. How do you destroy that table? Stop dreaming about it. Whoa, where'd you put it? It was never there. The world was never here. Yeah. The Eibishter basically has to involve himself and cause it to be from nothing, and it is nothing if he doesn't continue causing it to be. Just like an imagination. Just like an imagination. The only thing is, an imagination is also real. It's a real imagination, and not even that would be, the world would be, not even an imagination. Okay, let's, with the next few minutes that we have, let's talk about, dangerous. Some dangerous things we have to be careful about this Hashgacha Protis. Unfortunately, other religions have this attitude towards medicine and so on, and it's an easy way out, so we all think for a moment when we're lazy, why should I go make a living? Hashgacha Protis, the Eibishter, he does everything. He's creating me. He's creating my existence. He's taking care of me. All the details that I need and that I have. What should I go think about it? Why should I go deal with it? Why should I go make an effort? Or why should I go to the doctor? Hashgacha Protis. The Eibishter is the one designing everything about me. Whatever I have to be, whatever I'm going to be, is because it's already pre-designed and it's already something the Eibishter is involved in. And that's a very dangerous risk that we take when we entertain this idea of Hashgacha Protis. If we don't have it carefully controlled in a way that it's not used the wrong way. And that is that the Eibishter tells us in the Torah, hey, guess what? You're my partner. Not because you're my partner, but because I'm going to give it to you only if you put in your part that I decided is your part, even though it makes no difference whatsoever. You ever try to tell your little child, Tati, help Tati, you're carrying something in, and the child's only making it 10 times worse, and you're using much more muscle strain and strength and general and effort just to make it that the child is helping, and because the child thinks he's helping. The Eibishter wants us to feel that we have a part. The Eibishter wants us, because this world was created in such a way that we have to do avodah. We have to do and make a keli in teva for panosa. We have to go to a doctor because that's the way the Eibishter gives the healing. The Eibishter is giving you the healing, not the doctor. The Eibishter is giving you the panosa, not the boss or some other source. But the Eibishter says, do it what you have to do according to the rules of the natural rules. Don't believe in the natural rules, but do it because you believe in Hashem. And that's why the Mishnah says that a Yid plants, not like a Goy plants. A Yid puts in a seed, and it's almost like he planted in one field and it grew in the other field. Because he's only doing it robotically. He's only doing it mechanically. He's only doing it because the Eibishter says, you want something to grow? Go through the motions of putting in the seed. And that's the Amunah of a Yid in the Eibishter, and we'll continue.